Utah. He completed a 3-year postdoctoral fellowship in pediatric neuro-oncology at the Huntsman Cancer Institute and a 2-year postdoctoral fellowship in pediatric cardiology at the University of Utah, their Department of Molecular Medicine. He is the author of 14 peer-reviewed academic studies, which is incredible, super awesome. So we're very excited to have him here with us today.
All right. Well, glad to be here today, and thank you for that introduction, and welcome to the Synergy team yourself, Megs. So, the heart is a fascinating thing. I've been asked to do this encore presentation to do a little bit of a deeper dive into the science behind the heart, give people a real understanding of this organ in our body that plays a huge, complicated role and integral role in our health. So just an overview of some different things first off with the heart, and we're going to go more and more in depth here. I'm going to speak about some of the misconceptions out there perhaps in the field about cholesterol, about nutrition in general, and have a little information about our products and the science behind that as well that all fits in. So right here, looking at muscle in general. So there's 3 classes mainly of muscle in the body. There's skeletal muscle, smooth muscle, and cardiac muscle. Now, skeletal muscle is pretty much the muscle people are familiar with. They say flex your bicep or something, and that's skeletal muscle. These are attaching the bones these are attached to the bones, and it's responsible for really the motion, the large movements that your body makes. It's also involved with your rib cage. The intercostal muscles are helping pull on your lungs to open them up so you can breathe. And the smooth muscles are basically found in the walls of your hollow internal organs. They're really prominent in your whole gastrointestinal tract, from your esophagus down to your stomach, your duodenum, into your small intestine, large intestine. Basically, we have a long tube running through us. It's about 35 feet long. And this is filled with this smooth muscle, which cannot be controlled consciously. It's actually run by its own separate nervous system. And this is interesting because it reacts to different things. For example, stretch reflex. So when you eat a lot of food and your stomach gets distended or stretched, that stretching of the lining signals to your body to start digesting, start going through this peristalsis or these rhythmic contractions, which digest your food, but they also release hormones. For example, leptin's released when that stomach is stretched, signifying that you're full, and that actually decreases your appetite. And when there's no stretch reflex, you release ghrelin, which is the hunger hormone. I think of it as ghrelin, like you grr when you're hungry. You got to learn a lot of things in science, so you pick up these little mnemonic devices and tricks. But today we're going to talk a lot about the cardiac muscle. That is the heart. This is a very specialized type of muscle. It's only found within the walls of the heart, and it combines some of the aspects of both the skeletal and the smooth muscle. So the cardiac has kind of the striations and the same way of flexing as the skeletal muscles, but it's also very interesting that it's controlled mainly involuntarily, in that there's what's called an action potential, or this electric charge, which comes from a certain group of cells in the heart called pacemaker cells. You hear about people with arrhythmias or problems controlling their heart rate. They need to get an artificial pacemaker put in. Everybody has a normal patch of cells in their body, which are on their heart, which controls the release of calcium ions, and it passes through this cardiac muscle to have this rhythmic, coordinated contraction of all 4 of these chambers in a specific order with specific timing. So it's really quite fascinating. These muscle cells are attached to each other in a long string through what's called intercalated discs, which allow the ions to pass through, which allows this action potential or this charge to move very systematically over the whole heart, causing these contractions. So just a summary: striated and non-striated muscles. So getting into cholesterol. Now, I'm sure we all heard of cholesterol. We might get our cholesterol checked. We might hear, oh, I've got high cholesterol. That's bad. A couple things about cholesterol. So we hear about different classes of cholesterol: HDL, LDL, and oxidized LDL. And what that is those are basically lipid molecules that are packaged up and floating around in the blood with different densities. HDL is high-density lipoproteins. LDL is low-density lipoproteins. You also have VLDLs, very low-density lipoproteins. But really, that's serving a lot of different functions. The HDL is considered the healthy cholesterol. These go into your blood and actually kind of scrub your arteries, which can clear out the LDL, can clear out these plaques. It's important to have a decent amount of HDL around. That's why you don't want your HDL too low, and why having low HDL is actually a risk factor for having cardiovascular problems later in life. And it also builds the structures of cell membranes. Cholesterol is an integral part of your brain, of your cell membranes. It makes the surface of your cells a lot more fluid and structurally mobile. In fact, infants have to have a very high-fat diet, including high cholesterol, to have proper development of their brain structures during infancy, getting into adolescence. And another important factor is it actually helps in digestion, helps digestion work more efficiently, but also produces bile acids. And bile is important. It's something your body uses to digest fat and absorb important nutrients. It actually uses bile acids to digest fiber as well, to cling to it, to break it down, and to pass it out through your feces. And that's actually the mechanism by which a high-fiber diet can reduce cholesterol. Because the fiber gets into your small intestine, it has to receive these bile acids to be processed. And your body pulls the bile out of your system. Your body notices, okay, I need more bile. So it takes the available cholesterol stores that are in your body and puts it into bile production. So you're actually helping your body naturally get rid of its cholesterol. And this little diagram over here, phase 1 through 4, as you see, is an occlusion of an artery due to a plaque that's forming, a blockage. And this is something that unfortunately happens to a lot of people as they get older. They've had years and years of a bad diet or some kind of cardiovascular problem where it's actually the oxidized LDL, that type of cholesterol. I'll get into that a little bit more in the next couple slides. But it forms a reaction with your other cells in your body. It becomes sticky. It sticks to the walls of the artery, and it becomes sticky for other oxidized LDL molecules as well, and macrophages. And it becomes this positive feedback loop, this downward spiral into this further and further narrowing of this artery until finally get to phase 4, and not enough blood can get back to your heart. And you basically run the risk of having what's called a myocardial infarction or a heart attack. So the word myocardial infarction actually means muscle of the heart with not enough oxygen. So part of your heart will actually die. And sometimes you can recover from this. Sometimes it recovers a little bit on its own. And sometimes you can't. And a lot of times these plaques forming, you don't really feel them coming on. You don't know until it's too late, which is why it's very important to take these proactive measures with your health and nutrition and supplementation to help with this. Getting back to cholesterol. So something else I wanted to point out. This right here is a bell curve, and the height of these bars represents the amount of patients, or a percentage of patients, that go into the hospital with a coronary artery disease, stroke, or a heart attack, some kind of coronary artery disease. And if LDL in of itself were bad and the number one factor in having cardiovascular disease, you would see this curve being shifted a lot more to the right here, over there where the LDL range is between 150 and 200. Instead, this bell curve of LDL values greatly matches the general pattern we see in society. A lot of doctors will say, well, you want your LDL in between 90 and 110. That's a healthy level. However, if you look at this graph, the highest percentages of people that go into the ER with a heart problem or a stroke have cholesterol range at the 91, or LDL cholesterol within the 90, 100, and 110 range. So what's going on here? So it's not just LDL in of itself that's causing the problem. As you can see, only 23% of administered patients had an LDL that was in the range where doctors start to red flag you, or over the 130 mark. 50% of patients actually had normal lipid profiles, normal as far as the amount of LDL there. So this is getting into the aspect, the idea of oxidized LDL, a more reactive, dangerous form of LDL that's out there. I always say you have good cholesterol, bad cholesterol, and really, really bad cholesterol. Good cholesterol, HDL, bad cholesterol, LDL, really bad cholesterol, oxidized LDL. Higher concentrations of oxidized LDL were associated with an increased risk of obesity, blood sugar regulation problems, high triglycerides, and it's also associated with subclinical CVD, cardiovascular disease, by its relationship with many cardiovascular risk factors. Everything's integrated in the body, all these inflammatory markers, and it all starts with the oxidized LDL. Another really cool study that I read here was looking at what's called hazard ratios for different biomarkers. Now, a hazard ratio is a measure of how associated a certain biomarker is with you having a problem. So, when doctors say, okay, having this problem increases your probability of having this event by 2 times or by 3 times, they're looking at hazard ratios. If something has a hazard ratio of 2 versus 1, then whatever that is doubling your risk for something. So this gives us a good idea of how these things are really correlated. So biomarker of total cholesterol, it's also important to mention here, a positive association or hazards associated with a hazard ratio of over 1. Anything 1 or below is not considered really attached to each other. So as you can see by this graph here, total cholesterol, having high total cholesterol is a hazard ratio of 1.2. So is that significant? Well, it's above 1, but it's a very small amount above 1. In fact, the range that they see with their standard deviation, 0.93 to 1.56, suggests that it's not that big of a factor, which is what I'm trying to summarize from the previous slides as well. It's not just total cholesterol. And then if you look at triglycerides, that's high fat circulating throughout your body. That's even higher. That's 2.34%. That's something we don't usually hear about, is triglyceride levels. But that's becoming more and more important. And that comes from having a healthy diet, low saturated fat, low trans fats, low to no trans fats would be beneficial for triglycerides, and exercise will help that as well. Having a high LDL gives you a hazard ratio of 1.9. So now you're running about double the risk of anything else here, and it's significantly higher than total cholesterol at 1.2, but it's still not that high. Now I'm going to jump into the things that are a lot more pertinent factors for cardiovascular health. This 1 over HDL, so the 1/HDL means an inverse relationship. This means low HDL. When you have low HDL, that's a hazard ratio of 6.61. So I was telling you how HDL is, I've remembered, as healthy cholesterol that's helps scrubbing your arteries and collecting the LDL and cleaning everything out. If that's low, now you're running a 6 times risk according to the hazard ratio for a future cardiovascular event. Oxidized LDL, this is the culprit I've been speaking about. That's an 8.26 hazard ratio. You've now octupled your risk of having a future cardiovascular event when you have high oxidized LDL. So you see there's a huge distinction now between LDL and oxidized LDL here, about 4-fold in the hazard ratio or the actual importance this has for your future health. And then unfortunately some people have the combination of high oxidized LDL and low HDL, and that basically is additive of those 2 previous risk factors, giving you a hazard ratio of 13.92. So this is why it's important to really pay attention to certain numbers and not sweat the small stuff about other things. However, total cholesterol does become a marker because it gives you a higher chance of having these other forms of cholesterol present. So it's like if I'm fishing and I'm casting my bait out into this part of the pond, this acre part of the pond that has 2 fish in there, versus I cast it out to an area with 500 fish. My odds of catching a fish become a lot higher just because there's more fish around. It's called mass action. So if there's more cholesterol around, you have a higher chance that some of that's going to be LDL. If you have more LDL than around, there's a higher chance that that might become oxidized to oxidized LDL. So it's not like I'm taking all the emphasis off of total cholesterol. I'm just saying that number is not, oh no, I've got high cholesterol. It's, oh, I've got high cholesterol. Let me take a closer look at my other numbers. So now as we can see here, cholesterol itself doesn't become the culprit. Oxidized LDL becomes the culprit, and behind oxidized LDL is this enzyme called myeloperoxidase. I spoke about this a little bit before. It can be abbreviated MPO for short. But this is an enzyme that is really becoming more and more of a marker of predicting the risk for these adverse cardiovascular events. So it's an enzyme, which means it's responsible for speeding up reactions in your body. Myeloperoxidase naturally is actually a beneficial enzyme that your immune system uses to kill bacteria. It's secreted from certain white blood cells called neutrophils. However, this has a very high probability of running rampant in your body and starts to attack other things. It can actually attack your microbiome. It's kind of a complex relationship between your immune system and your gut microbiome, where the gut microbiome, there's a lot of factors which can cause an unbalance of the good versus bad bacteria in your gut microbiome. It induces inflammation. This inflammation triggers your immune system to produce more myeloperoxidase. Now, that myeloperoxidase in of itself can attack your gut microbiome and your gut, creating more inflammation. And that inflammation further upsets the balance of your gut microbiome. So it's this huge loop where you just can't escape from unless you intervene with something targeted, especially for myeloperoxidase. So this is where the problems can occur. And this is why I spoke a lot about proarginine and our PC4 complex. What really makes proarginine special and what we used to patent it was the paying attention we did to myeloperoxidase activity. And these assays were actually done in our Hughes Center, and this allowed us to patent it. So I mentioned before, proarginine, it mentions arginine in the name. Arginine is responsible for this nitric oxide effect, this vasodilation. That's really important, and that's what we drive. However, there's this character behind the scenes, this insidious aspect of myeloperoxidase, which can also inhibit how well this works. So we didn't stop with just arginine. We then add a complex of 4 different botanical ingredients. Each of those individual ingredients by themselves have activity against myeloperoxidase. They inhibit myeloperoxidase to a certain degree. So this is just a diagrammatic representation of that, where I color-coded each of the 4 compounds, different colors, dark blue, light blue, green, and red. And those represent the 4 individual components of what we call PC4. And the way that I made this graph was I took those individual values, I added them, and I set that at 100%. So if I had a 1-to-1 comparison of them working individually versus together, I'd expect to see the mixture of them hit 100%. So what did we see? Very interestingly, and for very good news for everybody, we saw 248% inhibition. So we're 2.5 approximately times above what we expected based on the additive effect. And when your combined effect is greater than the predicted additive effect, it's called a synergistic relationship. So it's not just the name of our company, it's the name of the mechanism of how these are all doing. 248%. And this was really discovered due to our scientists that we have at the Hughes Center, due to the methodology and the way that we have to test these things. We understand myeloperoxidase, we understand 4 different pathways it uses to form and 4 different ways that it does bad things. So we're able to hit what's called parallel pathways. We're not going to feed in these multiple things into one pathway that doesn't do much good. We're going to find 4 different sectors to hit it from different sides. That's how you get synergy. And this is what allowed us to patent this material. It's like if you had the task of filling up a 1,000-pound gas tank and you pull up to a gas station with 4 pumps. Well, if you only have one opening to your gas tank, it's not going to do you much good. You can only do one at a time. A lot of formulations out there, a lot of other scientists, a lot of other companies are trying to combine ingredients that all go through the same spout of that gas tank. It doesn't allow for that gas tank to be filled or your problem to be solved any quicker. We're able to identify 4 different spouts to this gas tank and really take full advantage of the cooperative effort of that whole gas station. So getting back to nitric oxide and what it's doing, we always mention a benefit being this vasodilation. So your blood vessels are naturally in a kind of contracted resting state. And then when you're exercising, when you're stressed, that can change. They become more contracted during times of stress where you have to shunt blood to different organs and shut it down to the skin, for example. Or when you're exercising and your body gets the signal that your muscles need more oxygen and nutrients, it can vasodilate and open up. So nitric oxide has the ability to assist in this dilation of the cells, make things more flexible, open it up. And that allows for a lot of things. It allows more blood to get to muscles where you need it. It allows more nutrients, more glucose, more energy to be delivered throughout your body, not only to your muscles, but to your other organ systems. This can decrease blood pressure, which is a huge factor of importance. And it can also remove cellular waste products. A lot of people report when they take arginine and they got that vasodilation effect that their workouts can go longer. They can help flush lactic acid and other waste products out of their muscles as they're working out. And the decreasing blood pressure is a huge issue. I know a lot of people might be listening, well, I don't have high blood pressure. I don't need that. It's like, well, the pre-hypertensive criteria of blood pressure seems to be it keeps on dropping in the medical community. We keep on diagnosing more and more people, and people younger and younger, with pre-hypertension or blood pressure that is creeping up into the range where it's going to start to do damage to your organs. And it's very scary because you don't feel high blood pressure. You don't know that you have it necessarily. And every day that goes by with high blood pressure can cause more and more accumulative damage to certain organ systems, to your kidneys. It can decrease your lifespan without you even knowing that it's there. It's the number 2 highest predictor for a future cardiovascular problem or losing years off your life for men. And for women, it's actually number 1. So it's very important to pay attention to this aspect of your health and to understand that your body, even though we produce nitric oxide naturally, you may not be producing as much as you think or be as efficient as you think. I showed before on the graph that we all naturally produce nitric oxide, but by the time we're about 40 to 50 years old, our body's only producing about 50% of the nitric oxide it was producing at the age of 20. So this is why I say everybody needs this and everybody can benefit from nitric oxide. Not only does it vasodilate and help with nutrient delivery and optimization of all your other systems, but it can help with your mitochondrial efficiency within your cells, help you use oxygen more efficiently. You feel like you have more energy. There's a lot of benefits for having your nitric oxide system balanced and optimized. So, getting into the heart now. I mentioned before that's a 4-chambered organ in your body, and it really is a miracle of biology. It's quite amazing. So just to follow a molecule of oxygen in your body going through the heart, being delivered to your tissues, is a very interesting process. So you breathe oxygen into your lungs. The oxygen comes in contact in the alveolar, the very small sacs inside of your lungs, with the red blood cells, and the hemoglobin inside of those red blood cells picks up an oxygen molecule to carry it throughout your body. But it's got to go through your heart to get that super boost of power. So newly oxygenated blood gets into your body and drains from that lining of your lungs into what's called the pulmonary vein, and then goes to your heart. Now, I had a little bit of difficulty when I was learning this when I was younger, because I used to traditionally think that you look at diagrams and you see arteries written as red, veins written as blue. And you're like, oh, that's easy. So arteries have oxygenated blood that's red, and veins have deoxygenated blood, which is blue. That is mostly true, but for the pulmonary circulation, it actually flips. That is because the actual definition of a vein is blood going to the heart, and an artery is going away from the heart. So in the case of the lungs to the heart, that's oxygenated blood that's going into the heart. This blood then goes from the lungs into the heart, into an area called the left atrium, via the pulmonary vein. So you have 4 chambers. You have 2 atria and 2 ventricles. You have a left and a right, left and a right. And these have very important functions. This blood goes into the left atrium, and the left atrium then contracts. That pushes blood into the left ventricle. That allows the blood to be cleared from the left atrium so that it can pick up more blood from the lungs while your body gets ready to eject this oxygenated fraction from your left ventricle. It's a much more efficient process than a 2-chambered heart or a 3-chambered heart that frogs or lizards have. It's really a miracle. Some people ask, why do we have so many different chambers? This seems crazy. It's pretty crazy, but you can also see why it's very important to have this organ optimized. It's important that everything is working in the proper order and the proper sequence, and why things like atrial or ventricular fibrillation can be very bad for your health and are very important reasons to go to the doctor and get those things fixed. So oxygenated blood, pulmonary vein, goes into the left atrium, contracts, pushes into the left ventricle, And when that left ventricle is filled, it then contracts, and that's the force that's going to push the blood back out into your body via the aorta, or the largest artery of your body. This right atrium then, or the blood then goes through your body, it delivers oxygen out to your tissues, and those arteries then taper down, and they become venules, very small veins, because you've lost all your oxygen, and you return to the heart. So the right atrium then receives the deoxygenated blood, and then that gets pumped in the same fashion to the right ventricle, and when that one's full, it then contracts the blood through the pulmonary arteries back to the lung. So once again, it's an artery that's carrying deoxygenated blood from your heart to your lungs. That then will offload your CO2 you breathe out. Those red blood cells are there in your lungs ready to receive another breath of oxygen, and the process goes over and over again. So, just some interesting things about the heart. This fist-sized powerhouse beats about 100,000 times per day, pumping 5 or 6 quarts of blood each minute, or about 2,000 gallons per day. So this little heart of yours is going to pump, in a span of 80 years, it can pump about 3 billion times. You think about flexing your bicep or flexing your quadricep 3 billion times. That's a crazy amount of work. If your heart is just this crazy powerhouse piece of equipment that not only has to beat that many times, but has to be synchronized perfectly. Not only synchronized, but able to respond to any kind of external stimulus, telling you to speed it up, slow it down, vasodilate, vasoconstrict. So it's very, very important to take care of this engine of our health that we really have.
So in conclusion, thank you so much for all of that. That was amazing. So the 5 points that we were kind of aiming to hit is that the heart is this special muscular structure. It's really incredible, and the muscle found within the cardiac and the heart is entirely unique to it. It's not found anywhere else in the body, which is just incredible. Second, cholesterol has a purpose. There is good, healthy cholesterol that, when balanced, helps your body function properly. And so you want to make sure that you're maintaining your HDL levels and watching your LDL levels and your oxidized LDL levels. So that's also really fascinating. Third, myeloperoxidase is actually kind of a hidden culprit for one of the reasons why we have cardiovascular unhealthiness. It's one of the reasons that we can have potential heart attacks and risks, because it's causing the oxidization of our LDL, which is why it's so important to have nitric oxide, because that allows our blood vessels to dilate and to circulate nutrients more easily throughout our body. And finally, just the blood and circulation that your heart goes through, and that it's able to circulate 2,000 gallons of blood every day, which is a massive number. I can't even imagine just carrying 2,000 gallons of water anywhere. And just the fact that it pumps that body to every aspect, pumps the blood, to every aspect of your body, it just defies gravity in that sense. And so that's super fascinating. The heart is just phenomenal. So also, this lovely graphic that you can see is available for download for you to share with your friends, with your family, because these are really cool, amazing facts about the heart that are so important to know and to recognize. So anyways, we really hope that you enjoyed this webinar. It's been our pleasure to talk with you and to learn from Dr. Jenkins. He's wonderful and so educated. So yeah, I hope you guys have a lovely rest of your day. Thank you for attending. Don't forget that we are here at Synergy, and we are focused on providing you with the best products and supplements so that you can unlock your full potential and live your elite health.